Zahiruddin Muhammad Babur, defender of the faith, the torchbearer of the Timurid dynasty, the dying flicker that shone the brightest. Babur, a descendant of Amir Timur from his father's side and a progeny of Chinggis Khan from his mother's side, was born in Andijan in the Fergana Valley, that is in present-day Uzbekistan. He was the eldest son of Umar Sheikh Mirza II, who ruled Fergana from 1469 to 1494. Umar Sheikh Mirza had two other wives and three sons and five daughters. His eldest daughter was Khanzada Begum from his wife Kutluk-Nigar Khanum, who was also the mother of Babur. His sons from his other two wives, Fatima Sultan and Umid Begum, were Jahangir Mirza II and Nasir Mirza respectively. Babur belonged to the Barlas tribe, which was of Mongol origin and had embraced Turkic and Persian culture. They had converted to Islam centuries ago and resided in Turkestan and Khorasan. Along with being fluent in Chagatai language, Babur was equally eloquent in Persian. In his memoirs, Babur has mentioned his father to be a ruler of high ambition and great pretension, and was always bent on conquest. But due to an anomalous accident in his dovecote, which was built at the edge of the building in the Aksi fort, it collapsed and he met his ultimate fate on Monday, Ramzan 4, June 8, at the age of 39. At the time of his father's death, Babur was in the Charbagh of Andijan. The news to reach him on Tuesday, Ramzan 5, that is June 9th. Thus, after his father's sudden death, Babur became the ruler of Fargana in the month of Ramzan of the year 1899 of the Hijri, that will be June 1494, at the age of 12. It would be a misapprehension to style Babur as Padshah in this particular period because the term appears to be an anachronism when translated to king or emperor previous to 1913 AH or 1507 AD, as until that date the Timurid house rulers were simply styled as Mirzas. So up to 1507 Babur's title would be simply Babur Mirza. Fargana back then was a small country abundant in grain and fruits. It was surrounded by mountains except for the west, leaving it to be the only direction viable for a possible enemy assault. The township of Andijan in Fargana also had the largest fort in Transoxiana after Samarkand and Kesh. During this time, two of his paternal uncles from the neighboring kingdoms, Sultan Ahmed and Mahmud Mirza, were hostile to his father, and a group of nobles who wanted his younger brother Jahangir to be the ruler threatened his succession to the throne. Meantime, Sultan Ahmed Mirza took Goratipa, Khujand, that is in Tajikistan, and Marginan, which is now known as Margilan in Uzbekistan. Sultan Ahmed Mirza came on to Kaaba and there he made halt. Fortunately for Babur, Sultan Ahmed Mirza had to retreat because Kaaba had a stagnant marshland kind of like water, which was passable only by the bridge. As they were in large numbers, there was crowding on the bridge and a number of horses and camels were pushed off to perish in the water. Another thing was that such a murrain or red water fever broke out amongst their horses that, gathered together, they began to die off in large numbers. According to Baburnama, another reason was that they found a resolution and single-mindedness in Babur's soldiers and peasants which would not let them hesitate from making offering to their lives so long as there was breath and power in their bodies. Thus Ahmed Mirza's forces retired. Meantime, Babur's other uncle, Sultan Mahmud Mirza, had come along the north of the Khujand water and laid siege to Akshi, that is in present-day Transoxiana. But he soon fell sick and being tired of fighting too, returned to his own country in Tashkent. Before moving ahead, for the convenience of the viewers, I have put two flowcharts for simplifying Babur's genealogy both for his father and mother side. You can always pause the video upon confusion. According to Babur, only a few amongst women were equals of his maternal grandmother, Hasan Daulat Begum, regarding judgment and counsel. She was wise and far-sighted, and Babur used to follow her advice. In fact, Babur was able to secure his throne mainly with the help of his grandmother, although there was also some luck involved. During this time, most territories around Babur's kingdom were ruled by his relatives who were descendants of either Timur or Genghis Khan and were constantly in conflict. At that time, rival princes were fighting over the city of Samarkand to the west, which was ruled by his paternal uncle Sultan Ahmed Mirza, given to him by his father Abu Zaid Mirza. After Ahmed Mirza's death, his brother and Babur's other paternal uncle, Sultan Mahmud Mirza, took over Samarkand, but his rule was short-lived. As per Baburnama, his rule was rather tyrannical. He made new regulations regarding tax and administration, and he did not rule for more than 5 or 6 months. In the month of the later Rabi, January 1495 AD, Sultan Mahmud Mirza was confronted by violent illness, and in 6 days he passed away from the world. He was 43 years old. The Hisar and Samarkand Beyks, after his death, agreed to send for Baisunghar Mirza from Bukhara, who was a son of Sultan Mahmud Mirza and was brought to Samarkand and was seated on the throne at the age of 18. Though Baisunghar Mirza was made prisoner for a few days during the Tarkhan rebellion of 1496 and his younger brother Sultan Ali Mirza was seated on the throne, but Baisunghar Mirza managed to take it again directly. Babur had a great ambition to capture the city of Samarkand. In the end of November in 1497, Babur entered the citadel of Samarkand after he besieged it for 7 months before eventually gaining control over it. Baisunghar Mirza had sustained a 7 month siege. His one hope had been in Saibani Khan the Uzbek, which he had lost, and with 200 or 300 of his men, he drew off from Samarkand for Khusrau Shah in Kunduz, who ultimately murdered him later. Babur was 15 years old, and for him the campaign was a huge achievement. It was a big deal for him, as his ancestor Timur had once captured the city and made it his capital. Babur being his descendant, it was indeed a big victory. But there's a difference between capturing and holding. After the hard siege, there wasn't much booty available for Babur and his army. The city was in such distress that it actually needed help instead. Taking something from it is a different story altogether. Babur didn't give in to looting and sacking, thus Babur had to face desertion in his army. On top of that, he didn't receive any promised help from Sultan Mahmud Khan of Tashkent, while other nobles like Sultan Ahmed Tambal and Uzun Hasan preferred Babur's brother Jahangir Mirza over Andijan and Akshi, and thus began their siege against Andijan, all while Babur was still in Samarkand. After receiving distress letters from his mother and grandmother Kulluk Nigar Khanum and Ahsan Daulat Begum respectively, Babur fell seriously ill. After recovering, he and whatever left of his army marched toward Andijan. After reaching Khujan, he received the news that 7 days ago, that is the day they left Samarkand, Andijan was surrendered. At Khujan, Babur was sent his mother, grandmother, and some families of his nobles. More bad news came for Babur when he got the news of Samarkand falling into the hands of another rival prince, Mahmud of Kunduz, Babur's cousin. Babur had held Samarkand for 100 days and he considered this defeat as his biggest loss, obsessing over it even later in his life after his conquest in India. Fortunately for Babur, in the year 1498 June, he took back Andijan, his father's country, after 2 years. For 3 years, Babur concentrated on building a strong army, recruiting widely amongst the Tajiks of Badakhshan in particular. In 1500 to 1501, news came that Samarkand has been fallen in the hands of Saibani Khan. Babur discussed the situation with his nobles. Since Samarkand came into the possession of Saibani Khan recently, the people wouldn't be attached to his rule, and thus, if Babur devised a well formulated offensive, they might be able to get the city back. They decided on setting up ladders and taking the fort by surprise, and even if the citizens don't fight for them, they won't at least go against them. That was Babur's initial thought process. And after 14 days, Babur again takes back Samarkand with around 240 men. But Saivadi Khan bought his family and other Uzbeks from Turkestan. It is emphasized on the fact that he wasn't done yet. On taking Samarkand, envoys and summoners were sent off at once and sent again and again with requests for aid and reinforcement to the Khans and Sultans and Beyks, but none of them helped Babur. Most of them refused to intervene, while others, whose relations to Babur's family were unpleasant and feared inconvenience, took no notice. Those who sent help, it was insufficient. Babur decided to meet the threat of Saibani Khan before it arrived at the city of Samarkand. The two armies met at Sarepul in the year of the Hijri 906, that is, in between 1500 to 1501 AD, where a decisive battle was fought which decided the fate of the Timurids and of the region, resulting in gradual conquest of Transoxiana, Khwarezm, and Khorasan by the Uzbeks. Muhammad Saibani took the fort Tabusi in Sugat in Tajikistan. This triggered alarm bells in Babur's mind and he decided to set out towards Bukhara to meet this challenge. In May 1501, he proceeded by slow marches on the road to Bukhara while Saibani advancing in the opposite direction and camped about 4 miles from him. The officers who survived, persuaded that nothing could now resist Muhammad Saibani Khan, scattered in various directions. Muhammad Majid Khan, who had once more joined Babur, fled to Khusrau Shah in Kunduz. Some escaped to Aradipa, Kambarali, and others, after reaching Samarkand hastily, removed their families from it as from a place doomed to destruction. A very few remained in the city following the fortune of their leader. Later, Babur recalls the Uzbek tactic, which he believes led to their victory and led to his loss. He writes, One great merit of the Uzbeks in battle is the flank assault. They never do battle without using it. Another is that they all, officers and ordinary soldiers alike, from front to rear, charge at a gallop shooting arrows. In retreat they do not go off pell-mell but withdraw orderly. After 2-3 days, Saibani Khan dismounted at some distance from the Samarkand fort and Babur was besieged by his army. For 3 or 4 months, Saibani Khan did not come near the fort but had it invested at some distance and himself moved round it from post to post. Once, when Babur's men were off their guard, at midnight the enemy came near to the turquoise gate, beat his drums, and flung his war cry out. It was a great source of trepidation and anxiety for Babur and his men. After that, they came night after night, disturbing them by drumming and shouting their war cry. Although envoys and messengers had been sent by Babur everywhere for help, but he received none. In between, he got the depressing news of Fargana being overrun and conquered again. The morale of Babur's army rapidly went down, and famine started hitting them in the besieged fort. Hence Babur gave in to the peace offering made by Saibani Khan and left the fort via the Shekhzada gate somewhere about midnight and was forced to give his sister Khanzada to Saibani Khan as a wife. He and his family was forced into exile and to live a life of a wanderer. With a couple of small victories and sudden losses, he finally had to abandon Fargana and ultimately resolved to march to Khorasan with 200 or 300 men. But he changed this plan for one taking him to Kabul, where a Timurid claimed to dispose the Arguns and holding it since the death of his uncle Ulugh Beg Mirza Kabuli in the year of the Hijri 907. Thus, in 1504, Babur besieged Kabul and took the city from the Arguns under Mukim Beg Argun to become the new king of Kabul and Ghazni regions. The territory gave him respite from his Uzbek troubles in Central Asia and allowed him to build his emerging kingdom into a strong and formidable power in later years, enough to be able to conquer northern India. Eventually, Mukim Beg negotiated a surrender after a siege that lasted for around 10 days and was allowed to live with his family. The region of Kabul and Ghazni were thus conquered without much severe resistance. The summer of 1505 was a difficult time for Babur. First, his mother died and he was struck down by a fever, and finally, Kabul was badly damaged by an earthquake. But he then learned that the leaders of Badakhshan had rebelled against the Uzbeks, so he joined the rebels and by the end of the summer had made himself Prince of Badakhshan. In 1507, Babur's rule was made more secure by the death of his brother Jahangir, but after his other brother Nasir's defeat at Khamchan, he was forced to abandon Badakhshan and return to Kabul. But after Herat fell to the Uzbeks under Saibani Khan, Babur was the only important ruler left in the Timurid dynasty. It was now in his hands to forge his destiny to be the torchbearer of the dynasty that once ruled great lands under Timur. Until this point, Babur had used the title of Mirza in common with the rest of the Timurids. With most of the family now out of power, he now decided to adopt the new title and declared himself the Padshah. After the events of 1507, Babur must have believed that he would never see Samarkand again, but an unexpected turn of events gave him one more chance to capture Tamerlane's old capital. In 1509, Saibani provoked the Safavid Shah Ismail, the ruler of a resurgent Persia. Towards the end of 1510, the Persians caught Saibani outside Merv, which is in present-day Uzbekistan, defeating and killing him, and rebellions broke out across his former empire, and Babur was invited to intervene. Back at Kunduz, Babur was reunited with his elder sister Khanzada. Babur took advantage of this chance to gain an ally and sent an ambassador to Shah Ismail. An alliance was soon agreed in which Babur was very much the junior partner. The terms of the alliance were such that would soon prove to be very damaging. The Shah was a dedicated Shiite and he insisted that Babur adopted the Shia faith and impose it on the Sunni inhabitants of Samarkand. This agreement would soon cost Babur the support of his inhabitants of Samarkand, and to make things worse, Persian support probably didn't play a major part in his upcoming victory. Babur managed to pull back another victory against the Uzbeks after a month-long standoff, and soon Babur's army was joined by a strong Persian force which took part in the triumphant advance to Bukhara. Samarkand was now open to Babur, but before taking the city, he dismissed his Persian allies. Finally, in October 1511, Babur entered Samarkand for the third time, this time in triumph. Babur's time in Samarkand can't have been pleasant. Initially greeted as a liberator, the reaction to him turned hostile when it became clear that he intended to honor his agreement with the Shah, even if he didn't persecute the Sunni. At the same time, his refusal to persecute the Sunni angered the Shah, who dispatched an army towards Samarkand. By the time the Persians arrived, Babur had already lost control of the city in 1512. The Uzbeks had also recovered from the shock of defeat in 1510 and launched a two-pronged assault on Babur's new empire. The main army attacked Tashkent while 3,000 men moved towards Bukhara. Babur led a small army against the second force and was defeated at the Battle of Koli Malik in May 1512. He managed to escape to Bukhara but was forced to abandon the city and return to Samarkand. It quickly became clear that Samarkand could not be held either, and Babur was forced to abandon the city for the third and final time. It was at this point when it became clear for Babur that he could no longer hold his ancestral lands, so he decided to look towards east. From around 1514, Babur began to look east towards Hindustan, referring to the Ganges Plain and the Punjab. This area had been briefly and brutally conquered by Tamerlane, who is also known as Timur, and Babur asserted this to have given him a legitimate claim to the area as Tamerlane's most important remaining descendant. There wasn't much he could do to reclaim his ancestral lands, but being one ambitious warrior, Babur never rested. Northern India at this time was ruled by the Delhi Sultanate under Ibrahim Lodi. Its power had already greatly depleted, all thanks to Timur's invasion in 1398, which acted as the final nail in the coffin. Finally, upon being invited by Alauddin, who was an uncle of Sultan Ibrahim Lodi, and Daulat Khan, governor of Lahore, Babur agreed and marched for Hindustan, finally defeating the Delhi Sultan in the famous Battle of Panipat in 1526. Thus, the seeds of the new Timurid dynasty were placed in Hindustan that ruled for another 300 years. In his memoirs, he mentions this victory and states, "This success I do not ascribe to my own strength, nor did this good fortune flow from my own efforts, but from the fountain of the favor and mercy of God." So this was our first video and our first attempt to provide history in as simple as terms possible. And if you like our work, do subscribe, share, like, comment, and follow us in our socials, which will be given below in the description at the end of the video. Thank you.